Today we're going to talk about second base, some more starting pitching, and way too early 2025 power rankings. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Wednesday, November 6th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Today, we are going to get back on the horse with our player breakdowns. We're going to talk Colt Keith, which I think is a really fascinating conversation because you can kind of cover the entire future of second base, whether you believe it's going to be Colt Keith or not. That conversation kind of revolves around him at this present moment. So we'll kind of discuss the position of second base within the breakdown of Colt Keith as well. We're going to talk Kenta Maeda, his rough year after signing a 2-year deal with the Detroit Tigers will presumably be back in 2025. And then The Athletic released a 2025 way too early power rankings, and the Detroit Tigers finished decently in them. So we're going to talk about them, where the rest of the AL Central is, what this means that they have like a decent okay rating, and what not. So let's start off with Colt Keith. In 148 games this past season, he hit 260 with a 309 OBP, a 380 slug. That is a 689 OPS. Had a 6.5% walk rate, a 19.8% K rate, and was worth 1.8 WAR on Fangraphs. This was his age 22 season. Just reiterating how young this dude still is. He turned 23 in August. So he will be 23 for a majority of next season. Obviously, the big talking point with Keith going into the year was the fact that he got the contract extension before playing a Major League Baseball game. I fully supported it then. I fully support it now. My stance on that deal has not changed whatsoever. Knowing the intricacies of like the arbitration process, which we've already gone over a lot kind of this winter, right? Like, this was and still is very much just like an absolute no-brainer for the Tigers. Even if he doesn't reach the ceiling that people thought he was going to, which I still think there's a good chance he does, this is still just an absolute no-brainer of a deal from the Tigers organization perspective. So before the season started, obviously, again, the extension, but I had said that I wasn't really worried about his offense and his hitting. I was more concerned and had pretty serious concerns, to be honest, about his ability to play second base long term, right? And the results from this season, the feedback from his rookie campaign, were kind of a roller coaster in both of those aspects. So let's start with defense. Defensively, the beginning of the year was really rough for him. And that's offense and defense, but we're just focusing on the glove right now. He struggled defensively the first couple of months of the season, and he was a big-time negative defender, and there were some serious concerns from myself and others about whether he was going to stick there long-term and be the team's second baseman. And people started throwing around first base, right? Like his arm grades out poorly, even when the defense got better, which we'll talk about in a second. The arm, like your arm doesn't just like magically get a lot better usually. So that is something that we have to keep in mind. That's why he moved from third base to second base initially, back when he was still in the minor leagues. He came up as a third baseman, right? That's why that move happened in the first place. The footwork was pretty rough, and he just really didn't look like he had much of a feel for the position. And as the year went along, however, he did get better, like pretty objectively. He took some big strides in the right direction on the defensive side of the ball as we got further and further into the season. He actually ended the season with an OAA of 0 on Baseball Savant, which, considering it was pretty comfortably negative for a majority of the first half of the year, is impressive. That means he was a plus defender in the second half of the season. And if you look on Fangraphs, he actually had positive 2 OAA. So depending on what website you use, what source you use, obviously to each their own. But regardless, like solid, around net 0 to even positive range over there at second base. His DRS, defensive runs saved, ended at -8, which is not great, really, no matter how you slice it. And I think that honestly, I'm glad that the numbers reflect how I felt when watching him. Like, it's always reassuring when the eye test and the numbers kind of say the same thing, and that's how I feel about Colt Keith's defense. I think that really accurately paints the picture of his defense so far. He is athletic, and he has the ability to cover a lot of ground. He's very big for a second baseman, and he's pretty darn fast for his size, right? He is an athletic dude. But the glove work itself and the footwork and whatnot, once he gets the ball or once the ball is in his vicinity, still needs a decent amount of work. Personally, not saying this is like gospel, just from where in my brain, I would prefer that to the opposite of that. I would prefer that you have the athletic ability to go and make a play on balls in all different directions, and you have the range to be able to cover a lot of ground. And we can try and teach you and work through, and Alan Trammell's out there every day with a lot of these guys, right? Like the coaching staff can try and help with the glove work and the footwork and the positioning and et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot harder to just improve range overnight. Not impossible. Want to make that clear too, but it's more difficult. So I would prefer that way. And so that leads us to like his standing on the defensive side of the ball. Like, I'm expecting him to play second again this upcoming season. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the show, but that is my expectation at the present moment, assuming the offense comes along as well. And that is the big question mark here. I actually don't think it's much of a question mark. That was just kind of like a dramatic transition. I think he's going to hit fine. Like, I still do. Sub 700 OPS this year obviously isn't ideal, but he had an OPS in the 300s on May 1st, and he ended with, it approaching 700. So the turnaround was solid. He didn't dip nearly that low ever again once May 1st came around. He certainly had better months than others, as I guess just like everybody does, but he was consistently making those adjustments throughout the year. We saw an explosion in May, and then July was like the big one. He had no OPS over 1,000 in July. But nearly the entire second half looked very similar. 270 average, 672 OPS. All of his numbers in this, post All-Star break were around that same area, that same stat line. He also, to his credit, hit 270 with a 757 OPS with runners in scoring position. So I think that naturally led me to, well, why were his numbers so consistently like slightly below average in the second half of the year, where in the first half of the year, it was kind of like peaks and valleys, just cold streak, hot streak, cold streak, hot streak. And we will talk about that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app can give you everything you need to place a live bet in the NFL, all on one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place all of your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow as we continue our off-season conversations. We got a few more player breakdowns to do. We got to get to Torkelson, obviously, who's going to be a big one. But we have free agents to start breaking down, trade possibilities to start talking about, more roster decisions to be made the next few weeks. The rest of November really will be very, very important to the outlook of the roster in 2025. So before we get to that, let's hop back into this conversation surrounding Colt Keith and what his status on this team is going to be in 2025. To have that conversation, we, of course, have to finish up how he did in 2024. I think one of the things I liked most about his season was how good he was against left-handed pitching. This is a guy that has done well against both-handedness throughout his entire career. I had no doubt that he would be able to, but he hit 305 against lefties this year. It wasn't just he was okay, he was serviceable. No, his numbers were actually better against lefties than righties on the season. I think that's unbelievably impressive, and it's a great sign of things to come when you talk about Colt Keith's future with the bat in his hands. But let's talk about the approach. That's what we teased before the break there. By the second half of the season, if you look at his spray chart and just where every pitch ended up on the baseball diamond, every ball he put in play, I should say, ended up on the baseball diamond, he's hitting a lot of fastballs the other way and pulling a lot of off-speed and breaking balls. And that's something we talked about ad nauseum throughout the season, something we brought up in almost every single game recap. He struck out and whiffed at a pretty league average rate, even slightly better than league average rate. But there is a ton of room for improvement here. This dude was legitimately one of the best minor league hitters this organization has seen in a long time. He has a whole other level that he can unlock and get to. I strongly believe that at the major league level, this guy is going to be a really, really, really good hitter. To get to that point, to where he's just consistently helping the organization long term and is a legitimate middle of the lineup or top of the lineup bat for this team, he has to time up fastballs just way better, right? And this is, there's good and bad here, right? This is a fine line to walk. The fact that he can make contact and put the ball in play and get hits on any type of pitch anywhere in the zone already is fantastic. Again, this was his age 22 season. Next year will be his age 23 season. That's a great sign this early in his young career. Go with the pitches, right? Miguel Cabrera was great at that. That's one of the many things that made Miguel Cabrera such a good hitter, was if you throw a fastball up and away, he was going to hit the ball and crush it the opposite way, right? He wasn't trying to pull everything. He was just giving what the pitcher gave him. And Colt Keith is showing that he has that ability. Obviously, nowhere close to Miguel Cabrera's caliber, but who is? The thing is, the timing with his fastballs, he is not getting any power behind fastballs. And that is an issue. That is something that needs to be addressed. I don't care if you pull them. I don't care if you're hitting them the other way. As long as you're able to drive the baseball consistently, that is what I want long term. And he did not show that he can drive velocity, fastballs specifically, at the major league level so far. I think that will come. I have all the confidence in the world that will come at some point. But it has led to this approach where if he gets off speed, anything that's not a fastball really, he's trying to pull it and crush it and lift it. And almost all of his home runs are on off speed and breaking balls. And he only has 2 homers off of 4-seam fastballs, and his spray chart, they're all in left field. And so I think that he needs to get to a point where he is able to drive anything that is thrown in the batter's box as opposed to just hit anything that is thrown in the batter's box. There's a huge difference between those two things. And that is where I think he is at in his development. And a lot of that is again, fastballs inside really ate him up because pitchers knew that he was going to let the ball get deep. And if you let the ball get deep when it's inside, it is very hard to hit, period. Nonetheless, hit for any remote source of power. So later in the season, he just got kind of force-fed fastballs inside because they knew he wasn't going to turn on him. All in all, Colt Keith put up 2.3 FWAR at second base this year, which was the 10th most in baseball. Now, remember, he had 1.8 FWAR total on the year. He played about 20 or 25 games where he either wasn't at second base or pinch hitting and whatnot that actually brought his WAR down, funny enough. But his WAR, his production at second base specifically was the 10th most in all of baseball. As a rookie, the 10th most productive second baseman in baseball. That's a really solid rookie season. He's being nominated for a Silver Slugger. He won't win it, but he got nominated. I am really excited about the future of Colt Keith. I'm really excited about 2025 because I strongly believe that this dude is only scratching the surface of what he can become long-term. And I think it's really, I'm going to remind people of that because this dude was the best prospect in the organization, arguably at one point about a year and a half ago. Okay. Let's talk about Kenta Maeda, who had a 6.09 ERA in 29 games pitched, 112 and a third innings pitched, a 19.8% K rate, a 6.4% walk rate, and a 1.38 whip. I mean, we can just call it what it is. We're not going to sugarcoat it or try to make it sound like anything other than what it is. The stuff just straight up wasn't there this season. And he had a lot of issues with his command as well, I think because he was trying to overthrow and overcompensate for the lack of stuff that he had throughout most of the season. But this starts and ends with the fastball. His fastball was legitimately, and I'm not exaggerating, one of the worst pitches thrown at the major league level in baseball this year. At a negative 16 run value on Baseball Savant, hitters hit 359 with a 667 slug against it. You're talking about over 1,000 OPS there. You're talking about prime Miguel Cabrera is the hitter every time he throws a four-seam fastball. That's just straight up not going to cut it. The slider wasn't much better, 310 average with a 569 slug against. I think the splitter was an okay pitch, and that is compared to the rest of baseball. But when compared to the rest of his own career, the splitter also took a clear step back too. So there are a lot of things we could talk about here. He's a fly ball pitcher and was even pre-Tigers era. He's almost always, at least the last 3 or 4 years, always been a fly ball over ground ball pitcher. And when we talked about that when we signed him, and I remember talking about it on this show and being well, Comerica's big and maybe he'll play into that a little bit. If he looked like he did in 2023, then that probably would have been semi-accurate, but he didn't. So instead, all of the fly balls were just homers, and he still didn't get any ground balls. His home run per 9 over the course of the season was 1.76. He was approaching 2 home runs given up per 9 innings. That is remarkably high. The biggest change on the year, in a positive light here, was the switch from starting pitcher to relief pitcher for him in the middle of the season. As a starter, he had in 17 starts a 7.42 ERA and a whip over 1.5. Over 1.5 base runners an inning. And you're approaching a run an inning with a almost 7.5 ERA. As a reliever, his ERA was 3.86. That's 42 innings. That's not a small sample size for a relief pitcher. And his whip was just a tick over 1. That's really solid. Those are good numbers. Those are fine, right? Especially for a multi-inning type of reliever, which was the role that he was providing for this team. It is also clear that his production changes a lot in high leverage versus low leverage, which I think was noticeable. With RISP, people put up like Barry Bonds numbers. Like, I mean, seriously, like almost a 400 average and OPS over 1,000 with 2 outs in runners in scoring position. Hitters literally, it was like 430 average against. Like, it was remarkable. His stats in high leverage, hitters as a whole hit 290 in high leverage situations against them. In low leverage, 222 with a 618 OPS rather, not OBP. And his numbers the second time through the lineup are awful. So that leaves us with what role are both of these guys going to have in 2025? And then we'll get to some power rankings as well. We'll do that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at Hims. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have the time to go to the doctor's office and get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside of your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable healthcare treatments from the comfort of your own couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, Viagra, Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works best for you. Start your free trial online today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and appropriate safety information. Subscription is required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Also got to talk to y'all about our friends over at Arena. It's been a while since we've talked about Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, very much myself, it's just out of frame. I have like binders literally full of baseball cards. The idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Luka Doncic, Ellie De La Cruz, Patrick Mahomes rookie card just isn't really in the cards. Pun very much intended. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now you are able to score gem mints for a fraction of the retail price. Every card that I listed was a hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and a clear hit rate for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the pack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, and auctioning. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full grade rationale provided and explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting program you have to check out. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb and using code LockedOnMLB. That's arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb, code LockedOnMLB for 10% off of your first purchase. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So talking about the roles for Kenta Maeda and Colt Keith in 2025. We'll start with Maeda because we just finished up talking about him before the break there. I think there's pretty much no chance he's in a starting rotation next season, but I think he'll likely have a role in the bullpen similar to this year, right? A low leverage innings eater, whether the team is up big or down big, and he can be stretched out if the starter doesn't go very far or if you need a lot of innings in the middle of a game. Is that a very niche role? Yes. Is there a lot of flexibility? No. Is it even remotely worth the contract that was given to him? Definitely not. But there is a serviceable role, it looks like, based on what we saw from him in 2024. It's just much, much, much lesser of a role than we anticipated when the team forked over the contract last winter. Hoping that the team and Maeda also work out a program for him to throw over the winter. This was a huge conversation point last year and now is going to be again this winter. He came into camp with a huge downtick in velocity and he never got it fully back until they moved him to the bullpen. because he doesn't throw very much throughout his career over the winter, over the offseason. He doesn't throw too terribly much and then only starts ramping up again right before pitchers and catchers report. Sounds like the Tigers are going to be much more in tune with him, much more open and giving him a throwing program and whatnot that he is going to utilize throughout the year. So hopefully that helps as well. When it comes to Colt Keith, as I said earlier, I really think it's second base again next year. There's been some talk about moving him around the diamond, certainly from the fan base. Early in the year, there was some from the organization, from some beat writers as well. He doesn't have the arm to play really anybody else anywhere else outside of first base. And if you're one of the people that really wants to try him at first base, like I get it. I really do. And I think we'll talk more about first base when we talk about Torkelson in his player breakdown. But this was a 2-win rookie season at second base with the improvements we saw defensively throughout the year. I think it's really encouraging. And I think value-wise to the organization, if he can make second base work, that is way more valuable and beneficial to the team going forward than he would be as a first baseman. So I expect him to be the second baseman next year, and I'm pretty excited for that, to be honest with you. In The Athletic, great publication. Subscribe to The Athletic. Cody Stavenhagen is the Tigers beat writer for The Athletic. He is a great dude that does a great job as well. The Athletic MLB staff writer team put together their way too early 2025 power rankings, and the Detroit Tigers came in ranked 11th. Be sure to go subscribe to The Athletic and go read the article fully. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing because I do want to encourage people to read it, and I don't want to spoil someone else's work here. But the Tigers being just outside the top 10 is, I think, pretty encouraging. They're the second highest team in the AL Central. The Guardians are obviously first, and they're 8th. They're only 3 spots ahead of your Detroit Tigers. The Diamondbacks and Mariners also both ahead of Detroit. This is very obviously a very early power ranking, and this is self-admitted by The Athletic in the article that it is like very, very early, and this will change a ton over the course of the offseason when all of these players start signing and trades happen and whatnot. But I think the reason why the Tigers are viewed as a top 12 team, you're in the postseason, right? And I think why is because there are legitimate long-term pieces in place for the Detroit Tigers, right? And that goes beyond just the ace in Skubal that still has years of control left. That's on the offensive side of the ball. Carpenter, Green, Meadows, Colt Keith hopefully plays himself into that caliber of player in that conversation this upcoming season, right? Like there are a lot of young, controllable, really talented pieces on this Detroit Tigers roster. And I think that has made for the most optimism surrounding this team in probably a decade, maybe over a decade. And that's really exciting, but I really think that is why. And when I saw this, the first thing I thought was of the Scott Harris quote from earlier in the year, where he said, "We are not going to spend money until we have a core put in place to build around." This is evidence that you have a lot of other very smart baseball people look at the Detroit Tigers and think there is a long-term young core that you can build around in Detroit right now. Take advantage of that and add pieces in the winter. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow as we keep our off-season content rolling out. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope, and I'll catch you tomorrow, baby. Go Tigers.